We had a fight in the street, broke up the saloon, burned down the town.
That was 3 days before the picture started.
Hollywood has never been short on artificial glamour. Behind the bright lights, carefully managed reputations, and polished public images, nearly everyone seemed to be playing a part. But Robert Mitchum was different. He challenged almost every unwritten rule of Hollywood simply by refusing to care about them. His indifference was so complete that it could almost feel intimidating. One woman famously described Mitchum as the kind of man who never needed to chase women because women naturally came to him. That effortless magnetism followed him throughout his career.
Oh, you sure had me fooled. I didn't know you were such a hard drinker.
I'm not. That's the easiest thing I do. Know that, Jack?
Yet for decades, audiences remained fascinated by one enduring question. Who was the real man behind those sleepy eyes that always seemed to conceal something dangerous? Mitchum rarely made the answer easy. Interviews revealed only fragments. Stories from Hollywood insiders often contradicted one another, and the actor himself seemed to enjoy keeping people guessing. The more anyone tried to understand him, the more elusive he became. But eventually, another man who understood Hollywood fame better than almost anyone offered his own perspective.
What do you say we make another picture together?
No, I think not.
Why, don't you have the stomach for it?
I haven't got the liver for it.
Dean Martin, the powerful king of cool, had worked directly alongside Mitchum. And when Martin finally spoke about his fellow actor, his memories offered a fascinating glimpse into the man behind one of Hollywood's most mysterious reputations. By the late 1960s, Dean Martin and Robert Mitchum were already firmly established as two of Hollywood's biggest stars. Yet they represented very different versions of masculine cool. Martin was celebrated for his effortless charm, dry humor, smooth singing voice, and remarkable versatility. Whether he was performing in a nightclub, appearing on television, or starring in a major motion picture, he carried himself as though nothing could ever truly bother him.
I read a thing a woman columnist wrote about you one time, and she said Mitchum was born the kind of man that does not have to seek women because they come to him.
Were that true?
Mitchum possessed a different kind of presence. He was famous for his restrained acting, quiet confidence, and an almost unnerving ability to dominate a scene without appearing to do much at all. Where other actors might raise their voices or exaggerate their emotions, Mitchum often did the opposite. So when Hollywood announced that Dean Martin and Robert Mitchum would appear together in the same film, the pairing immediately attracted attention.
That's not true.
Well, they come to me with their troubles, you know.
Yeah. Is there...
Moviegoers were going to see two legendary screen personalities collide, each carrying his own unmistakable version of cool. That film was Five Card Stud, released in 1968. Rather than following the formula of a conventional Western, Five Card Stud blended familiar frontier imagery with the tension and uncertainty of a murder mystery. The combination gave the movie a darker atmosphere than many Westerns of the period. Dean Martin played Van Morgan, a wandering gambler who becomes caught in a disturbing chain of murders inside a small Western town. Morgan was far from the typical gunslinging hero. Instead, Martin portrayed him as a calm, observant outsider who gradually begins connecting the clues while suspicion spreads through the community. Across from him stood Robert Mitchum as Reverend Jonathan Rudd. At first, Rudd appeared respectable, composed, and deeply religious. He spoke softly and carried himself with the authority expected of a preacher.
Women and song. Wine, I'm not too crazy about wine.
But as the mystery unfolded, the audience slowly discovered that something far more disturbing existed beneath that dignified exterior. It was precisely the kind of role Mitchum could make unforgettable. He didn't need lengthy speeches, exaggerated gestures, or explosive emotional scenes to create tension. Mitchum could communicate danger with a glance, A slight change in his expression, a pause before answering, or a carefully measured line could completely transform the atmosphere of a scene. That restraint had always been one of Mitchum's greatest strengths as an actor. He rarely appeared interested in showing audiences how hard he was working. Instead, his performances felt natural, almost casual, which made his darker characters even more unsettling. You were never quite sure what they were thinking or what they might do next. Reverend Jonathan Rudd became a perfect example of that style. Mitchum allowed the character's darker nature to emerge gradually rather than revealing everything at once. The calm exterior remained intact even as the truth underneath it became increasingly disturbing. That contrast helped turn Rudd into one of the film's most memorable characters and gave Mitchum another opportunity to demonstrate why his understated approach could be so powerful. But the chemistry between Mitchum and Martin was just as intriguing.
Oh, I drink, but I'm not a boozer, not an alcoholic or anything like that.
Both men had built careers around appearing effortless, yet their personalities and acting styles were far from identical. Martin's relaxed charm met Mitchum's darker, more mysterious presence, creating a screen pairing audiences had rarely seen before. Commercially, 5 Card Stud reportedly earned approximately $3.5 million in the United States and Canada. But the film's lasting fascination would ultimately have less to do with its box office numbers than with the two men standing at its center. The result was hardly a major box office sensation, but 5 Card Stud still demonstrated the drawing power of its two leading stars. Critics also recognized what made the film unusual, particularly its successful combination of a traditional Western atmosphere with the darker suspense of a murder mystery. But for many fans, what happened behind the cameras became almost as fascinating as what appeared on screen. The working relationship between Dean Martin and Robert Mitchum quickly attracted attention because, in many ways, the two men approached Hollywood in remarkably similar fashion. Neither was known for bringing unnecessary tension onto a movie set. Both preferred to keep things relaxed, trust their instincts, and avoid making acting look more complicated than it needed to be.
When I work, it's serious work.
Mitchum, in particular, had little patience for endless rehearsals. He would often read through the script, absorb the essential purpose of a scene, and then rely on instinct once the cameras started rolling. Rather than carefully planning every movement or expression, he preferred to let the moment develop naturally. That approach could make Mitchum unpredictable. Directors might not always know exactly what he was going to do when a scene began. Yet, strangely enough, that unpredictability also made him remarkably dependable. Mitchum understood his characters so well that even when he departed from what was expected, the result often felt completely believable. Dean Martin worked with much of the same freedom. Martin frequently used humor to loosen up the people around him. He joked between takes, improvised when the opportunity appeared, and rarely behaved as though filmmaking needed to become an overly serious affair. His relaxed personality helped other actors feel comfortable, and when paired with Mitchum's equally instinctive style, something unusual happened. Neither man seemed interested in competing with the other. According to recollections surrounding the production, Martin and Mitchum treated each other with genuine professional respect.
And the serious work that I do, I try to have a little fun with it.
There were no obvious battles for attention, no attempts to steal scenes, and none of the ego clashes that could easily erupt when two established Hollywood stars shared the screen. Instead, each seemed to recognize exactly what the other brought to the film. Martin allowed Mitchum's darker, more restrained presence to breathe, while Mitchum never attempted to overwhelm Martin's natural charisma. That balance helped create the unusual chemistry at the heart of 5 Card Stud. They were very different performers, yet their differences complemented rather than challenged one another. And after the movie was released, Martin began speaking positively about the experience. During interviews and public appearances, he expressed admiration for Mitchum's natural acting ability and the extraordinary calmness he brought in front of a camera. Martin had spent decades surrounded by some of the most talented entertainers in the business, so praise from him carried a certain weight. But his observations about Mitchum were only beginning. Their relationship became even more revealing when the two men later crossed paths on television, particularly in the relaxed environment associated with the Dean Martin show.
I wouldn't change one thing. Not one thing.
Unlike traditional interview programs, Martin's television world rarely felt rigid or overly rehearsed. Guests weren't expected to sit perfectly still while answering a predictable list of questions. The atmosphere was intentionally loose. Celebrities joked, interrupted each other, improvised, and often behaved more like friends at a private gathering than performers appearing before millions of viewers. For someone like Robert Mitchum, that environment was ideal. Mitchum had never appeared particularly comfortable with the machinery of celebrity. He could promote a movie when necessary, but carefully presenting himself to the public never seemed to interest him very much. With Martin, however, there was less pressure to perform the role of Robert Mitchum, Hollywood star. He could simply be himself. From the moment Martin and Mitchum shared the stage, their chemistry was obvious. They traded short remarks with almost effortless timing. Sometimes a glance, a pause, or the smallest smile between them was enough to send the audience into laughter. Nothing appeared forced. That was precisely what made their interactions so entertaining. The humor didn't come from two performers desperately searching for punchlines. It came from the contrast between their personalities. Martin brought his familiar warmth and playful energy, while Mitchum answered with the dry, almost indifferent calmness that had become his trademark, and beneath the jokes was genuine admiration. Martin repeatedly praised Mitchum as one of the rare actors who could walk into a scene without ever appearing to act. In Martin's view, Mitchum possessed something that couldn't simply be learned through lessons or perfected inside an acting school. It came from the man himself. Mitchum's life experiences, personality, confidence, and instinct all seemed to flow directly into his performances. Instead of visibly transforming himself for the audience, he allowed the character to exist through him. Martin was especially fascinated by Mitchum's composure in front of the camera. Hollywood was filled with actors who demanded attention through dramatic gestures, powerful speeches, or explosive emotional displays. Mitchum needed almost none of that. He could remain perfectly still and somehow become the most interesting person in the scene. A glance mattered, a pause mattered, even silence could become threatening when Mitchum controlled it. Martin understood how difficult that kind of simplicity really was. After all, his own career had been built partly on making enormous talent appear effortless. Perhaps that was one reason he recognized the same quality so clearly in Mitchum. Another subject frequently surrounding Mitchum was his famous indifference toward public expectations. Hollywood loved carefully constructed personalities, and stars were often expected to protect their image almost as closely as their careers. Mitchum seemed almost completely uninterested in doing either, and according to Martin's impression, this wasn't some clever publicity strategy designed to make Mitchum appear rebellious or mysterious. Martin believed the man audiences saw was remarkably close to the man who existed when the cameras stopped rolling. Mitchum simply didn't seem to care very much about satisfying Hollywood's expectations. That attitude became especially entertaining whenever the two men joked about drinking, nightlife, and their famously free-spirited reputations. Martin leaned into his cheerful, playful persona, while Mitchum responded with the same dry calmness he brought almost everywhere else. The contrast was irresistible, yet audiences could sense something underneath the comedy. Neither man appeared desperate to impress the other. Neither seemed interested in proving who was funnier, tougher, or more famous. They were simply comfortable together. And perhaps that comfort revealed more about Robert Mitchum than any carefully prepared interview ever could. Around Dean Martin, the mysterious actor occasionally allowed the public to see beyond those famously heavy eyes and glimpse the personality underneath. But Martin's admiration for Mitchum went deeper than his acting ability or his sense of humor. The more time he spent around him, the more Martin began to understand that Robert Mitchum's legendary reputation wasn't simply a Hollywood creation. They allowed everything to unfold naturally. A brief answer could suddenly become a joke, a pause could turn into a punchline, and an unexpected moment of improvisation could completely change the direction of the conversation. That unpredictability made Robert Mitchum's appearances alongside Dean Martin feel different from those of many other Hollywood guests. And through those television appearances, Martin helped audiences discover a side of Mitchum they rarely encountered on the big screen. Behind the cold, intimidating exterior was a man who usually spoke quietly, possessed a remarkably dry sense of humor, and seemed almost uncomfortable with becoming the center of attention. This was very different from the dangerous drifters, hardened criminals, soldiers, and morally complicated characters audiences had come to associate with him. Martin seemed fascinated by that contrast. He repeatedly emphasized that Mitchum was one of the rare Hollywood stars who had managed to preserve his individuality in an industry constantly demanding reinvention. Trends changed, audiences changed, studios changed what they wanted from their stars. Yet Mitchum rarely appeared interested in changing himself simply to remain fashionable. He didn't chase whatever image happened to be popular. He didn't seem desperate to please everyone. And he certainly didn't behave as though maintaining fame was the most important thing in his life. Those observations carried particular weight because they came from Dean Martin, someone who had actually worked beside Mitchum and spent considerable time around him. Martin wasn't simply discussing the mysterious movie star audiences knew from theater screens. He was describing the colleague he had watched between takes, backstage, and away from carefully controlled Hollywood publicity. Rather than focusing only on Mitchum's famous performances, Martin spoke about the man's instincts, professionalism, work ethic, and unusual ability to remain completely himself. That made his perspective especially revealing. Through their appearances together, audiences weren't merely watching two Hollywood legends exchange jokes. They were also witnessing the genuine respect Martin held for Mitchum and catching small glimpses of the complicated personality hidden behind one of cinema's most recognizable faces. But the deeper you look into Robert Mitchum's life, the more contradictions begin to appear. Behind the image of the free-spirited rebel was a surprisingly enduring family life. Behind the relaxed attitude was a career that survived scandals capable of destroying other actors. And behind the Hollywood bad boy reputation was a man whose private life was far more complicated than the legend suggested. Mitchum had earned that rebellious reputation long before becoming one of Hollywood's biggest stars, and once the image attached itself to him, it followed him for almost the rest of his life. Unlike actors who relied on carefully managed publicity campaigns, Mitchum seemed almost indifferent toward controlling what people thought about him. His blunt manner, laid-back behavior, and apparent disregard for Hollywood expectations made him stand out in an industry obsessed with appearances. Then came the incident that could have destroyed everything. In 1948, Robert Mitchum was arrested in Los Angeles in connection with marijuana possession, alongside several other people. At a time when movie studios closely protected the public images of their stars, the scandal was explosive. Newspapers seized on the story. Suddenly, one of Hollywood's rising leading men wasn't being discussed because of a new movie. His name was appearing in headlines connected to drugs, police, and scandal. Mitchum was ultimately convicted and spent time in custody. Under the rigid morality standards surrounding Hollywood at the time, such an incident could easily have ended an actor's career. Studios had abandoned performers for considerably less, and there was every reason to believe Mitchum could become another cautionary tale. But something unexpected happened. his career survived. The studios continued to recognize his value, and more importantly, audiences didn't abandon him. If anything, the scandal strengthened the rebellious image already forming around Robert Mitchum. Instead of seeing him as another carefully manufactured Hollywood star, some moviegoers began viewing him as exactly the opposite, a man who couldn't easily be controlled by studio executives, publicity departments, or conventional expectations. It was an image Mitchum never seemed particularly eager to correct. The arrest, therefore, became part of the mythology surrounding him. The sleepy eyes, the deep voice, the casual attitude, and now a genuine brush with the law, all combined into a public persona that felt more dangerous and authentic than the carefully polished images of many of his contemporaries. And remarkably, that reputation followed him for decades. Years later, the legal history surrounding the case would receive further attention, helping bring closure to an episode that had played an enormous role in shaping Mitchum's early public identity. But by then, the scandal had already become permanently woven into the Robert Mitchum legend. Yet while the public saw a rebellious Hollywood outsider, his private family life told a surprisingly different story. Long before Mitchum became an international movie star, he married Dorothy Spence in 1940. Their relationship would endure through virtually everything that followed: the sudden fame, demanding film schedules, public scandals, constant travel, Hollywood temptation, and the endless rumors surrounding Mitchum's personal life. The marriage lasted until Mitchum's death in 1997, spanning 57 years. For many people, that longevity seemed almost impossible to reconcile with the man's public reputation. Mitchum had spent decades being portrayed as a free-spirited rebel who lived according to his own rules. He also worked alongside some of the most glamorous and desirable women in Hollywood. Yet Dorothy remained a constant presence throughout his life. She had known Mitchum before the full force of Hollywood fame arrived, and she remained beside him after he became one of the most recognizable actors in the world. While Robert lived under the glare of cameras, headlines, and public fascination, Dorothy provided a sense of stability behind the scenes. That didn't mean their marriage escaped controversy. Over the years, newspapers and entertainment publications repeatedly connected Mitchum romantically with famous actresses. Stories involving some of Hollywood's most celebrated women circulated frequently, adding even more fuel to his already notorious reputation. Among the names linked to him were Ava Gardner and Rita Hayworth. Whether every story was accurate was another matter entirely. Hollywood gossip had always existed somewhere between fact, exaggeration, and carefully manufactured publicity. But in Mitchum's case, the rumors fit so perfectly with the public image surrounding him that people were eager to believe them. Robert Mitchum rarely confirmed the romantic stories surrounding him, and he showed even less interest in publicly explaining them. Rumors could spread across Hollywood, newspapers could speculate, and reporters could ask questions, but Mitchum generally allowed people to believe whatever they wanted. Dorothy Spence approached the attention in much the same way. Despite being married to one of Hollywood's most recognizable and controversial stars, she rarely stepped forward to defend her husband or respond publicly to the latest headline. Dorothy preferred privacy. She stayed away from the spotlight whenever possible and refused to turn the Mitchum marriage into another piece of Hollywood entertainment. That decision may have been one reason the family managed to maintain a sense of stability through decades in an industry famous for destroying relationships. Robert and Dorothy had 3 children: James Mitchum, Christopher Mitchum, and Patrine Mitchum. Both James and Christopher eventually entered the acting world, following at least partly in the footsteps of their famous father. Neither would achieve the enormous cultural influence Robert had accumulated, but both established careers of their own and continued the family connection to Hollywood. And the Mitchum name didn't disappear with Robert's children. Later generations also became involved in entertainment, including his grandson, Bentley Mitchum, who pursued acting and filmmaking. By then, the Mitchum family had developed a Hollywood legacy stretching across multiple generations. It created yet another fascinating contradiction in Robert Mitchum's life. To the public, he remained the ultimate rebellious outsider, a man who seemed almost impossible to control and who had little interest in following Hollywood's rules. At home, however, there was a marriage that endured for nearly 6 decades, 3 children, and a family whose connection to entertainment continued long after Mitchum became a legend. But eventually, even a man who had survived scandal, changing Hollywood tastes, and decades of demanding film work faced an opponent he couldn't simply shrug off. As Mitchum grew older, his greatest struggle was no longer with Hollywood. It was with his declining health. By that point, Robert Mitchum had already built a career few actors could ever hope to match. Across several decades, he appeared in dozens of films covering westerns, crime dramas, war pictures, thrillers, film noir, and more. Yet regardless of genre, audiences immediately recognized the qualities that made a Mitchum performance distinctive. He rarely seemed to be trying. His characters often displayed remarkably little emotion on the surface, yet something was always happening underneath. A slow glance, a slight movement, or the particular way he delivered a sentence could communicate more than another actor might accomplish with an entire speech. Perhaps no performance demonstrated that ability better than Harry Powell in The Night of the Hunter, released in 1955. Mitchum portrayed a sinister preacher whose respectable appearance concealed something terrifying. Powell could speak softly, quote scripture, smile politely, and appear perfectly composed. Yet beneath that surface existed a ruthless predator. The contrast made him unforgettable. Rather than turning Powell into an exaggerated monster, Mitchum made him frightening precisely because he remained so controlled. He built tension through his eyes, his measured voice, and carefully timed moments of silence. There was no need for constant shouting. Mitchum understood that stillness could sometimes be more frightening than rage. The result was a character that would eventually be remembered as one of cinema's most disturbing villains. Harry Powell's influence stretched far beyond the film itself, inspiring later actors and filmmakers who recognized the power of creating menace without excessive theatrics. Several years later, Mitchum demonstrated that ability again in Cape Fear. This time he played Max Cady, a former convict consumed by revenge against the lawyer he blamed for his imprisonment. Cady was threatening not simply because of what he did, but because of the psychological pressure he created whenever he appeared. Mitchum didn't need endless dialogue to establish danger. His presence did the work. Max Cady seemed capable of appearing anywhere, waiting patiently while his victim's fear grew. That relentless sense of intimidation turned the character into something far more disturbing than a conventional movie villain. Once again, Mitchum proved how effectively he could operate inside psychological gray areas. And Cape Fear became one of the defining thrillers associated with his career. Years later, Mitchum returned naturally to the world of noir with Farewell, My Lovely, taking on the role of legendary private detective Philip Marlowe. By then he was an older actor, but the qualities that had made him compelling decades earlier remained intact. If anything, age strengthened them. The tired eyes, calm delivery, and world-weary presence seemed perfectly suited to a detective who had seen too much and trusted too little. The performance reinforced Mitchum's special connection to film noir and demonstrated that his understated approach could remain effective even as Hollywood changed around him. But Mitchum wasn't limited to theatrical films. He also found major success on television, particularly through the epic miniseries The Winds of War. The production attracted enormous attention for its scale, historical setting, and performances, while Mitchum's involvement introduced him to viewers who may not have experienced his earlier films during their original releases. For an actor whose career had already stretched across generations, it was another remarkable chapter. And when those performances are viewed together, something becomes clear. Robert Mitchum helped define a particular kind of American screen character, the anti-hero. His characters often refused to fit neatly into categories. They weren't always heroic, but they weren't necessarily villains either. They existed somewhere between the two, men shaped by experience, personal codes, hidden motives, and moral contradictions. That ambiguity made them feel unusually human. It also helped influence the kinds of complicated protagonists that would dominate American cinema in later decades. Long before morally conflicted anti-heroes became commonplace, Mitchum had already demonstrated how fascinating a character could become when audiences were never completely sure whether they should trust him. Yet across all those roles, one quality remained constant: restraint. Robert Mitchum never seemed interested in proving how talented he was. He didn't overwhelm scenes simply because he could, and he rarely depended on dramatic displays to capture attention. He simply stood there, watched, listened, and waited. Then, with one look or one perfectly delivered line, he could take control of the entire screen. It was the same quality Dean Martin had recognized years earlier: the rare ability to make acting disappear completely. And as Mitchum entered the final chapter of his life, that legendary calmness would be tested in ways no film role could ever prepare him for. Robert Mitchum relied on silence, subtle expressions, eye contact, and the rhythm of a scene rather than exaggerated emotion or lengthy speeches. While other performers might fight to command attention, Mitchum often achieved the same result by doing almost nothing at all. That restraint became his unmistakable signature. It was also the quality Dean Martin had recognized so clearly. Martin understood that Mitchum's apparent simplicity wasn't laziness or indifference toward his craft. It was control. Mitchum knew exactly how much a scene required, and he rarely gave it anything more. But as the years passed, the man who had appeared almost indestructible on screen began facing increasingly serious problems away from the cameras. After decades of heavy smoking, Mitchum's health gradually deteriorated. He suffered from emphysema, which severely affected his breathing, and he was later diagnosed with lung cancer. Even then, he didn't immediately disappear from Hollywood. Mitchum continued accepting projects when his health allowed it, choosing work that suited what he was physically capable of doing while gradually reducing his schedule. There was no dramatic retirement announcement and no elaborate farewell tour. Instead, he simply worked less. His final appearances still carried the same quiet composure that had defined him for decades. Age had changed his appearance and illness had weakened his body, but the unmistakable Mitchum presence remained. Eventually, however, his condition made continuing impossible. He gradually withdrew from public life, bringing one of Hollywood's longest and most distinctive acting careers toward its conclusion. Yet, as his time on screen ended, appreciation for what Robert Mitchum had accomplished was only growing stronger. On July 1st, 1997, Robert Mitchum died at his home in Santa Barbara, California, after suffering from lung cancer and emphysema. He was 79 years old. News of his death quickly traveled around the world. For generations of moviegoers, Mitchum had seemed permanent, a face that belonged to Hollywood itself. He had survived changing trends, scandals, the decline of the old studio system, and dramatic transformations in American filmmaking. Now, one of the last great figures of his era was gone. His family said he died surrounded by loved ones, and even in death, Mitchum avoided the kind of elaborate Hollywood spectacle that had never interested him very much in life. There would be no enormous public farewell designed for cameras and headlines. In accordance with his wishes, Mitchum was cremated and his ashes were scattered over the Pacific Ocean. It was an appropriately simple ending for a man who had spent much of his life appearing deeply suspicious of ceremony, celebrity, and unnecessary attention. There was no need for a grand monument. His films had already become one. Following his death, actors, directors, critics, and filmmakers reflected on the enormous influence Mitchum had quietly accumulated. Many considered him one of the defining screen performers of 20th century American cinema. The qualities they praised were remarkably consistent: his natural presence, professionalism, unpredictability, and extraordinary ability to communicate complicated emotions without openly displaying them. Filmmakers, including Martin Scorsese, have spoken admiringly about Mitchum and the unusual naturalism he brought to the screen. His smallest expressions could suggest an entire history. A change in his eyes could transform a scene. A few seconds of silence could become more powerful than pages of dialogue. That influence extended into later generations of filmmaking. Quentin Tarantino has also expressed admiration for Mitchum and the kind of screen presence he represented. For directors who became fascinated with morally complicated characters, Mitchum provided an early blueprint for something that would eventually become central to modern cinema: the anti-hero. Mitchum's characters could be charming and threatening at the same time. They might behave heroically in one moment and reveal something deeply troubling in the next. Audiences were rarely told exactly how they were supposed to feel about them. That uncertainty made them fascinating, and countless actors who followed studied the same qualities Dean Martin had noticed firsthand: the controlled gaze, the measured delivery, the refusal to overplay a scene, and the confidence to allow silence to do the work. Mitchum demonstrated that screen power didn't always come from movement. Sometimes it came from stillness. Sometimes the actor who appeared to be doing the least was actually controlling everything. His legacy also extended beyond his performances. After decades working steadily in film and television, Mitchum left behind an estate built through his long entertainment career and other assets accumulated over the years. Much of what remained was passed to his family through arrangements made before his death, allowing his relatives to continue protecting the interests connected to his work. But Robert Mitchum's real inheritance cannot be measured by property or money. It exists every time a filmmaker creates a villain who never needs to shout. It exists whenever an actor discovers that a pause can be more powerful than a speech. And it exists in the morally complicated characters who continue to dominate modern movies and television. Today, Robert Mitchum remains firmly established among the great actors of classic Hollywood. Films such as The Night of the Hunter, Cape Fear, Out of the Past, and Farewell, My Lovely continue to introduce his work to audiences who were born decades after those performances were filmed. Yet perhaps one of the most revealing perspectives on Mitchum came from someone who understood effortless cool better than almost anyone: Dean Martin. Martin had seen Mitchum when the cameras were rolling and when they weren't. He had acted opposite him, joked beside him, and watched firsthand how little effort Mitchum appeared to need in order to command attention. And Martin understood something audiences had sensed for years. Robert Mitchum wasn't desperately trying to be mysterious. He wasn't carefully manufacturing the image of a rebellious Hollywood outsider. He simply refused to become the person Hollywood expected him to be. Behind those famously sleepy eyes was an actor of extraordinary instinct, a man filled with contradictions, and a personality that even those closest to him could never completely explain. Perhaps that was why the mystery survived. Robert Mitchum spent decades playing dangerous men, outsiders, detectives, criminals, soldiers, preachers, and anti-heroes. Yet the most fascinating character associated with his name may always have been Robert Mitchum himself. And Dean Martin's memories helped reveal something important about the man behind the legend. Beneath the scandals, the rebellious reputation, and the intimidating screen presence was a professional who earned the genuine respect of the people talented enough to recognize just how difficult his effortless style really was. More than a quarter century after his death, that presence still hasn't disappeared. The eyes remain unforgettable. The performances still feel dangerous, And Robert Mitchum remains exactly what Hollywood could never quite turn him into, a man who belonged completely to himself. If you enjoyed this story about Robert Mitchum and Dean Martin, make sure to like the video, leave a comment telling us your favorite Robert Mitchum performance, and subscribe to the channel for more stories about the legends, secrets, and forgotten moments of classic Hollywood. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.